Not because it was a warning, but because it was the truth. And if you'd told me a year ago that I'd find peace in the quiet of a creaky old house at the edge of town, without the approval, the applause, or the people I'd once called my family, I wouldn't have believed you. Now I know better. Hi, my name is Lorraine. For years, I believed betrayal had a face, until the night I saw my own sister smiling while my husband pushed me down the stairs. The first time I thought I was pregnant, it ended in tears. I still remember sitting in the upstairs bathroom of our small cedar house in Vermont, wrapped in a towel like it could shield me from the truth. The single pink line on that test blurred as I cried for hours. My husband, Ethan, barely looked up when I told him. He just said, "Maybe we're not meant to be parents," and went back to his laptop. That was almost a year ago, and yet here I was again, staring at two faint lines, trembling not from fear, but from something I thought I had buried: hope. I didn't shout. I didn't call anyone. I just sat on the edge of the tub, watching the sunlight move across the tiles as if it were marking time. After 3 years of trying, after surgery, after nights of silence between Ethan and me, I was pregnant again. But this time, I told myself, I'd keep it safe. I wouldn't tell Ethan until the doctor confirmed, until I was strong enough to face his reaction, or worse, his indifference. That evening, when Ethan came home early, I studied him the way I used to study books, searching for warmth in his face, for kindness in his eyes. It wasn't there. He tossed his keys in the dish, asked if dinner was ready, and sat at the table without a smile. We ate in silence. The chili was left over from 2 nights ago. He didn't notice. He never did anymore. "You okay?" I asked quietly. "Fine, just tired." No kiss, no touch on my back. He stood up before I'd finished eating and disappeared upstairs. I tried to clean the kitchen, but my mind wouldn't settle. Folding laundry, I reached into my purse for a grocery list and froze. My fingers brushed against something smooth, cold, foreign. I pulled it out. A recorder, tiny, black, hidden in my bag. For a long moment, I just stared, my breath caught in my chest. Did Ethan put this here? Or was I losing my mind? I tucked it back quickly. My stomach churned. I couldn't confront him. Not yet. By Friday, Ethan was suddenly attentive, not affectionate, just watchful. At breakfast, he asked, "Didn't you have that OB checkup coming up?" I froze. "How did you know about that?" "You put everything on the fridge calendar." "No, I didn't. Not my medical stuff." He just poured his coffee and said nothing more. Later, when I ordered decaf instead of regular coffee, he watched me like a scientist testing a theory. That night, lying in bed beside him, I stared at the ceiling. I thought of the first pregnancy, how he held me only briefly after the miscarriage, then whispered, "Let's not tell anyone. It's embarrassing enough." And now, I was carrying life again. But I didn't recognize the man beside me anymore. On Saturday, my younger sister Nora called. She always called at odd hours, her voice too bright, too sharp. "Big sis, what are you doing next Friday? Mom and Dad want a family dinner." I hesitated. "I might have work." "Liar," she laughed. "You work from home. You're probably in pajamas right now." I forced a chuckle. "Maybe." "You sound different," she teased. "Heavier, must be something in the water." I pressed my hand to my stomach, silently. Nora always knew how to twist words into daggers. That night, after Ethan claimed a migraine and went to bed early, I sat on the couch with the lights dimmed. My hand rested over my stomach. "I hope this time," I whispered to the quiet room, "they believe you exist." From the hallway, I caught a glimpse of Ethan watching me, his expression unreadable. By Friday, the faint lines on the test had darkened. My appointment with the doctor was scheduled for Tuesday, but I hadn't told Ethan. I hadn't told anyone. Still, Ethan insisted we attend the family dinner. "It'll look weird if we skip again," he said. I wanted to stay home, to rest. But I knew better than to fight him when he was determined to maintain appearances. I wore a long cardigan over a loose blouse, hoping no one would notice the small changes I had begun to see in the mirror. In the car, Ethan kept his hands tight on the steering wheel. No music, no words, just silence. When we pulled up to my parents' house, the yard glowed with twinkle lights. A table of wine and cheese sat waiting, surrounded by cousins in pastel dresses and pressed shirts. Nothing looked threatening, but my skin prickled anyway. Nora arrived 15 minutes later, fashionably late as always. She wore a white jumpsuit that demanded attention. She hugged me too long, whispering into my ear, "You're glowing. Must be something in the water or in your belly." Before I could answer, she handed me a small pink gift bag with glittery letters for future little surprises. My pulse quickened. She giggled loud enough for the cousins nearby. Just for laughs. You never know when a woman your age decides it's time to prove a point. I wanted to vanish. The evening blurred. People asked about work, home renovations, vacations. Ethan moved through the crowd with his practiced charm. I stayed near the drinks table, sipping sparkling water and pretending it was something stronger. When I declined wine for the third time, my mother tilted her head. "No Merlot tonight? That's not like you." "She's been eating strange lately, too," Ethan added with a too-tight smile. "Cravings, maybe. Probably nothing." His tone was light, but it carried a hook. Eyes turned toward me. Calculations began. I fumbled for my purse to grab my phone. It had already slipped to the deck. As I bent down, a sharp gasp cut through the air. There on the wooden boards lay the test, the one I had kept hidden in the zippered pocket. Nora pressed a hand to her chest, her voice dripping with drama. "Oh my God, are you seriously carrying that around like a trophy?" Someone snorted. Another aunt whispered. Ethan picked up the test, turned it in his hand, then looked straight at me. "This isn't new," he said coldly. "She's been keeping it for weeks. Don't read too much into it." My throat tightened, my chest burned. I barely remember walking to the bathroom, shutting the door, staring at the stranger in the mirror. I hadn't told them because I wasn't ready, because I wanted to protect this fragile hope just a little longer. Now it felt dirty, touched by everyone's laughter. I placed my palm on my stomach, a silent apology, a promise I couldn't speak aloud. When I opened the door, Nora was waiting in the hallway, arms crossed, lips curled. "Was that supposed to be your big reveal?" she sneered. I didn't answer, but inside me, something cold and sharp began to form. The morning after the family dinner, sunlight poured into the bedroom like nothing had happened, but my body felt heavy, like I had carried stones all night. Ethan's side of the bed was empty. I didn't know if he had left early or never came home. I sat up slowly, nausea twisting in my stomach, not from pregnancy, but from shame. The memory replayed again and again. Nora's smirk, Ethan's cold voice, my relatives whispering. I thought I had kept my secret safe, but somehow it had slipped through their fingers like sand. Downstairs, I made toast but never ate it. I poured half a cup of decaf the way my doctor had suggested. Even that felt like a secret. My eyes drifted to the small office down the hall. Once, Ethan and I had painted it yellow for a nursery we never got to use. Now, it was a dusty taupe. I hadn't set foot inside for months, but something pulled me there that morning. I opened a drawer in the old file cabinet. Buried under receipts and bank statements was my leather journal. My breath caught. I hadn't written in it for a year, not since the miscarriage. I opened to a page marked with a ribbon I didn't remember placing. My stomach tightened. It wasn't just open, it had been read. The entry described the night I lost the first baby. My handwriting shaky, pages stained with tears. But the words I had written in private, were the same ones Nora had mocked at brunch weeks later. Almost word for word. She had been here. She had read it. She had weaponized it. I closed the journal slowly, my fingers pressing hard against the leather. My chest tightened, Not just from betrayal, but from recognition. This wasn't new. This was a pattern. That evening, Ethan came home in a pressed shirt smelling of cologne. He acted as if nothing was wrong. "Ready for dinner?" he asked casually. "I'm not hungry." He studied me with the same detached look he had worn for months. "You've been distant." I wanted to scream, to ask him why he was hiding recorders in my purse, why Nora knew things she should never know. But I stayed silent. Silence had always been his weapon. Now, it was mine. Later that night, when he fell asleep, I went downstairs. The glow of the router in the corner caught my eye. A thought crept in. The cameras. Ethan had installed a home security system last year. "For us," he said. But he never gave me the login. I searched the junk drawer until I found the pamphlet with the customer ID. My hand shook as I called the support line. Within minutes, I had access. I clicked through folders, my heart racing. When I opened the file for the night of the family dinner, I saw everything. The backyard lit with twinkle lights, cousins laughing, Nora making her entrance like a movie star. At 7:03 p.m., my purse fell. At 7:04, the footage cut to black, 2 full hours missing, no audio, no video, just static. When the recording returned, the party was already winding down. I leaned back, staring at the screen. My pulse roared in my ears. That blackout wasn't a glitch. It was deliberate. And in that silence, I realized the truth. Ethan and Nora weren't careless. They were coordinated. The next morning, I made myself walk calmly into Ethan's office. My laptop open, the footage still on the screen. He appeared in the doorway, drying his hair with a towel. "What are you doing?" "Checking the cameras." "Why?" I turned in my chair to face him. "Why is there a 2-hour gap in the footage from the party?" His smile faltered. "Probably a power glitch. The system's old." No storms that night. No outages. I checked. The air grew sharp between us. He set down the towel, his voice low. "You're digging a lot lately. That's not healthy." "Neither is hiding evidence," I said flatly. His nostrils flared. He didn't answer. He just grabbed his keys and walked out. When I was sure he was gone, I saved the corrupted file to a flash drive, encrypted it, and tucked it into my desk drawer. If they thought I was bluffing, they were going to regret it. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I sat in the dark living room, hand on my stomach, whispering to the life inside me. "I'll protect you," I murmured, "even if it means protecting us from them." I didn't know how, not yet, but I knew this. Silence had cost me too much already. The following week blurred together. I moved through the days as if I were underwater, hearing voices muffled, seeing colors dulled. Ethan kept his distance, but his silence pressed against me like a weight. Nora, of course, found her ways to linger in the background. A text here, a smirk there. I could feel her circling, waiting for me to stumble. By Tuesday, the doctor confirmed what I already knew. "You're about 7 weeks," she said gently, sliding the ultrasound across the counter. I held the paper in my hands like it was made of glass. A flicker, a heartbeat, a beginning. I wanted to share that joy. But the face that flashed in my mind wasn't Ethan's. It wasn't Nora's. It was my own, staring back at me in the mirror, reminding me I was alone in this. When Friday came, Ethan insisted we attend another family dinner. His voice carried no room for debate. "It'll look strange if we don't show up," he said. His tie already knotted, his blazer pressed. He cared more about appearances than about me. I wanted to scream, to curl up in our cedar house and protect the quiet life growing inside me. But I knew better than to fight him when he was set on performance. The drive was short, but suffocating. Ethan's knuckles white around the steering wheel, his silence deliberate. I kept my hand on my stomach beneath the folds of my cardigan. When we arrived, the house was glowing with warm lights, the scent of garlic butter drifting from the kitchen. From the outside, it looked like comfort. Inside, it felt like a stage. Dinner began with pleasantries. My father asked about my work, though he hadn't shown interest in years. My mother passed the bread basket with a smile so polished it hurt to look at. Nora arrived fashionably late, of course. Silk blouse, perfect makeup, every step screaming confidence. She sat across from me, lifted her wine glass in a mock toast, and didn't look away. Her silence spoke louder than words. Halfway through the meal, Ethan's father cleared his throat. "Lorraine," he said carefully, "we'd like to move past all this. For everyone's sake." I stared at my plate, the edges of the bread blurring. They weren't asking for truth, they were asking for silence. Ethan leaned closer. "It's time, Lorraine. Stop making a scene." I bit my tongue until I tasted iron. After dessert, Ethan guided me upstairs, his hand firm on my back. 2 minutes, he said. "That's all I need." We stopped on the landing, where the staircase curved gently. He turned to me, hands tucked into his pockets, his mouth twitching like he was almost amused. "So," he began, "are we going to keep pretending?" My chest tightened. "Pretending what?" "That you're pregnant." He tilted his head, studying me like I was a stranger. "That this isn't just another one of your games." The words stung, though I had heard versions before. "It's not a game, Ethan. It's our child." His eyes were cold. "You've done it before. Talked about symptoms, acted fragile, got everyone worried for nothing." "That's not what happened." My voice cracked, but I forced myself to stand tall. He leaned closer, his breath sharp. "You need help, Lorraine." And then, just like that, he placed his hand on my shoulder and pushed. It wasn't violent. It wasn't a shove in anger. It was deliberate, calculated. My foot caught the carpet's edge. My body twisted. Pain shot up my spine as I tumbled down 3 steps before slamming onto my side. My elbow cracked against the wood. My hip struck the corner. The breath left my lungs in a rush. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my body refusing to move. From above, I heard it. A laugh, light, musical. I turned my head, my vision swimming. Nora stood at the balcony railing, arms crossed, eyes fixed on me. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask if I was all right. She smiled. The world slowed. The laughter rang in my ears louder than the throb of pain. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Seconds later, Ethan descended the stairs, his face suddenly painted with concern. A mask. "You tripped," he said, kneeling beside me. His tone was tender, too tender, like an actor rehearsing lines. I couldn't answer. He drove me to the hospital in silence, both hands on the wheel, jaw tight. No music. No words, just his measured breathing. Fluorescent lights burned above me in the emergency room. Nurses moved with quiet urgency. Blood work, ultrasound, whispered words I couldn't catch. Ethan sat in the corner, flipping through a magazine, as if we were waiting for a haircut. Eventually, a young doctor walked in, her face soft, her voice quieter than the hum of machines. "You were pregnant," she said carefully. "But I'm afraid the pregnancy didn't survive the fall." The world didn't spin. It just stopped. No tears came, no scream, just silence. The same silence from a year ago, only louder this time. I stared at the ceiling tiles as if they could anchor me. The ache in my chest spread through my body until I couldn't tell where the pain began or ended. Later, in the recovery room, a nurse checked my vitals. She was older. Her eyes kind but searching. She hesitated before speaking. "Can I ask you something?" I turned my head slowly. "You didn't just fall, did you?" My lips parted, but no sound came. She nodded anyway, as if my silence was answer enough. When she left, I placed a trembling hand over my stomach. It wasn't my body that had failed this time. It wasn't bad luck. It was him and her. As the hours crawled by, the hospital grew quiet. Ethan scrolled through his phone, restless, detached. My phone lay on the side table, returned to me in a clear plastic bag with my wallet and keys. A faint red dot blinked on the screen. My heart skipped. I had forgotten the voice memo app was still open. With shaky fingers, I pressed play. The recording wasn't long, barely 2 minutes, but the voice was unmistakable. Ethan's, calm, calculated. "I just want to understand," he said to the doctor weeks earlier. "How can you really verify if a pregnancy is real? Some women exaggerate, for attention, for leverage." The doctor's voice, professional and distant, responded, but Ethan's tone lingered, cold and methodical. He had been preparing for this, planning it. I replayed it once, twice, 3 times. Each time the chills spread deeper into my chest. This wasn't an accident. It was never an accident. When Ethan offered to drive me home the next morning, I shook my head. "I've called a car," I said quietly. He raised an eyebrow, lips twitching like he wanted to argue. But I didn't wait for his reply. I climbed into the rideshare, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The driver didn't speak, and I was grateful. I needed the silence to think. As the Vermont countryside blurred past the window, I rested my hand over my stomach one last time. It wasn't just grief I carried now, it was truth. And I would not let them bury it. The ride home from the hospital felt longer than it was. Vermont's rolling hills passed outside the window, dotted with early spring blossoms, but I barely saw them. My hand stayed wrapped around my phone, the voice memo playing again and again in my head. Ethan's voice, calm and methodical, asking the doctor how to verify if a pregnancy was real. He had been planting seeds long before the fall, long before the loss. By the time the car pulled into our driveway, my body felt hollow, but my mind was awake. The cedar house looked the same as always, pale green shutters, a wreath on the door that Nora had once picked out for me years ago, back when I still believed she wanted the best for me. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The silence hit me first. No clinking dishes, no humming music, just the faint hum of the refrigerator, steady and cold. I walked straight to my office, the smallest room in the house, once painted yellow for the nursery we never got to use, now painted over in taupe, bland and lifeless. I crouched beside the locked cabinet, slid the key into the slot, and pulled out an old shoebox filled with receipts and notes. I hadn't touched it in months, maybe longer. But now, my hands moved with purpose. It didn't take long to find it. A slip of paper, edges curling, yellowing with age. Ethan's purchase confirmation from a medical novelty site. Fake ultrasound kits. He once told me it was for a Halloween prank. I hadn't questioned it then, but now, reading the item code, the description, identical to the scans I'd seen him joke about, my stomach turned. He had planted doubt early, prepared excuses, crafted a story where I was the unstable one. I laid the receipt next to my phone. Then I opened my laptop and began typing. Dates, times, conversations. Every moment that had felt strange, every joke Nora had made that cut too deep, every time Ethan asked about symptoms like he was studying a case file. The pattern was there, as clear as the ink on the page. It wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was a slow burn. Coordinated, calculated, and they thought I would never notice. By evening, the weight of exhaustion finally pressed down. I sat on the couch with a mug of tea, staring at the blinds as stripes of fading sunlight crossed the living room. My phone buzzed on the table. A message. It was a link to a blog post. The title alone made my breath catch. When Family Turns. Fiction, a sister's perspective on manipulation. I didn't need to see the author. I knew Nora's style. Light, witty, charming to outsiders, cruel between the lines. She called me fragile, dramatic, a woman with a history of exaggerating for sympathy. She didn't name me directly, but the hints were clear. The comments poured in beneath it. "You're so brave, Nora. Toxic siblings are the worst. She needs help." I set the phone down slowly. Heat crawled up my chest, deliberate, steady. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I walked to the cabinet and pulled out another folder, one I hadn't opened in years, the words on the front written in faded ink. Lorraine's War. Inside were scraps, notes from the first miscarriage, receipts, fragments of memory I had tried to bury. I spread them across the dining table. This time, I wasn't looking for comfort. I was building a case. The next day, I drove downtown to the Women's Legal Aid Center. The building was small, beige, with peeling paint on the shutters. But stepping inside, I felt something I hadn't in weeks: safety. I sat across from a young volunteer named Karina. Her eyes were steady, seasoned, older than her face. "Take your time," she said. So I did. I laid it all out: the receipt for the fake ultrasound kit, the flash drive with the corrupted camera footage, the audio of Ethan questioning my pregnancy, even the screenshots of Nora's blog. When I finished, my hands trembled, but my voice didn't. Karina leaned forward. "Do you want to handle this quietly, or do you want to make it public?" I looked her straight in the eye. Quiet didn't protect me. I'm ready to set it on fire. That night, I sat at my desk with the glow of the laptop against my face, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I began to write. Not as Lorraine the victim, not as the sister labeled dramatic, not as the wife called unstable, but as a woman with proof. I titled it, Gaslit by Blood. I didn't use names. I didn't need to. The details were enough. The comments, the receipts, the audio clips. I blurred what needed blurring, redacted what I had to. But the truth pulsed beneath every word. By the time I hit publish, it was nearly midnight. Within an hour, the post had thousands of views. By morning, tens of thousands. Lawyers, therapists, advocates, women I had never met sharing their own stories. You're not alone. Thank you for speaking when I couldn't. This happened to me too. My story wasn't just mine anymore. Nora, of course, tried to ignore it. She posted a sunlit photo of herself in the garden, captioned sunshine and no regrets. But the comments shifted quickly. Wait, isn't this the sister from that blog? Care to comment, Nora? You looked a lot more confident before the receipts dropped. For once, her charm didn't shield her. I sat at my kitchen table sipping tea, scrolling through the comments. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. By evening, Ethan's mother texted me. We should have a calm discussion, a family dinner to clear the air. I stared at the message for a long time. The words were soft, but I could see the edges. It wasn't an invitation. It was a trap. I could have ignored it, but I didn't. Instead, I charged my phone, packed a spare flash drive, and slipped a recorder into the lining of my purse. If they wanted a dinner, I would give them one. But this time, I wouldn't come empty-handed. The invitation came disguised as kindness. We just want to clear the air, Ethan's mother had written. A family dinner, neutral ground. But I had learned something these past weeks. In this family, nothing was neutral. That Saturday evening, I drove myself to their house. No Ethan at the wheel. No rehearsed silence between us. Just me. My purse felt heavier than usual, not from lipstick or keys, but from the recorder stitched inside the lining, the flash drive tucked into a side pocket. The sky was bruised purple when I pulled into the driveway. The windows glowed with warmth, laughter spilling faintly through the glass. From the outside, it looked like belonging. Inside, it was a performance. They greeted me with brittle smiles. Lorraine, Margaret said, her hands cool on mine. We're so glad you came. Her tone was polished, but her eyes flickered toward Ethan. He stood near the fireplace, jacket crisp, posture easy, as if nothing in his world had cracked. And then Nora appeared, white dress again, hair swept back, the very picture of innocence. She kissed my cheek like we were still children playing in the yard. Big sis, she whispered, her smile razor sharp. You look, well. I didn't answer. I took my seat at the long oak table, placing my purse gently by my feet. Dinner began with pleasantries. My father-in-law spoke of weather, of spring planting. My mother-in-law offered me salad as if it were peace, but the undercurrent buzzed beneath every word. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat, his voice calm, rehearsed. "Lorraine, we're all concerned about you, about the stories you've been posting." Nora set down her fork, eyes wide with false innocence. "People are starting to ask questions about our family, about me. It's unfair." My pulse steadied. This was why I had come. Not to eat, not to explain, but to end the game. I folded my napkin slowly, placed it beside my plate, and looked each of them in the eye. "You want truth?" I said softly. "Let's start with this." I reached into my purse, pulled out the flash drive, and slid it across the table. "What's this?" Ethan asked, his voice just a touch too tight. "Footage from your security system," I said. "The one that mysteriously lost 2 hours the night of the dinner. Convenient blackout, wasn't it? Right when my purse accidentally fell." Nora's fork scraped against her plate. Margaret shifted in her chair. "And then," I continued, my voice steady, "there's the audio. Ethan, your own words, asking the doctor how to tell if a pregnancy was real, as if I were inventing it." I pressed my phone on the table, hit play. His voice filled the room, calm and damning. Silence followed. Heavy. Thick. My father-in-law cleared his throat, but no words came. Nora broke first. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "Out of context. Anyone could—" "Stop," I said sharply. For the first time in years, my voice cut through hers. "You read my journal, you mocked my grief, and you stood there smiling when Ethan pushed me down those stairs." Her face paled. For once she had no ready comeback. Ethan leaned back in his chair, folding his hands, his mask cracking at the edges. "Lorraine," he said smoothly, "you're hurt." "I understand, but you're twisting things. That fall was an accident." I stared at him. "Accidents don't laugh, Ethan, but Nora did." I let the words hang. Around the table, discomfort grew. Margaret's hand trembled as she lifted her wine glass. My father-in-law stared at his plate as if it could swallow him whole. The silence became its own verdict. I reached again into my purse and pulled out a thin envelope. I slid it across the table, next to Ethan's plate. He didn't touch it. Inside were copies, receipts for the fake ultrasound kits, screenshots of Nora's blog post, all neatly organized. "You built a story where I was unstable," I said. "You planned it together, and you thought no one would ever see the pattern. But now, the world does." Nora's hand trembled as she reached for the envelope. Ethan caught her wrist. For a moment, their eyes locked. Not siblings-in-law, not even conspirators. Just two people suddenly aware that their mask was slipping. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. "I came tonight because you asked me to, but don't mistake my presence for weakness." I picked up my purse, slung it over my shoulder. My heart thudded, but my voice remained calm. "I'm not your secret anymore, and I won't be your scapegoat. This ends here." As I walked toward the door, Nora's voice broke, sharp and desperate. "You'll regret this, Lorraine. You'll lose everything." I turned, hand on the doorknob, and met her eyes. "I've already lost everything that mattered. What's left is mine to protect." I opened the door and stepped into the cool night air. The sky was clear, stars scattered like promises above me. For the first time in years, I breathed without choking. Back in my car, I pressed stop on the recorder hidden in my purse. Every word from that dinner was captured. Ethan's denials, Nora's cracks, the silence of the family that said more than any defense. I leaned back against the seat, eyes closing. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned, and this time, I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every woman who had been silenced, doubted, dismissed. The morning after the dinner, I woke with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. The house was silent, the cedar walls holding the echoes of all the lies. But the silence no longer belonged to Ethan, It was mine. I brewed coffee, black and strong. No cream, no sugar. My hands no longer shook as I held the mug. On the table lay the flash drive, the envelope, and my journal. 3 things that had once been weapons used against me. Now, they were my shield. By noon, I was back at the Women's Legal Aid Center. Karina greeted me with the same steady gaze as before. "You're ready," she said, not a question, but a statement. I slid the flash drive across her desk. "Everything's here. The recordings, the receipts, even last night's dinner." She plugged it into her laptop, eyes narrowing as she scanned the files. "Lorraine, this is enough to open a case. Emotional abuse, coercive control, maybe even criminal negligence if we connect the fall to his actions." Her words made my chest tighten, but not with fear, with validation. For the first time, someone else named what I had lived. "What happens if I go public?" I asked. Karina leaned back. "You'll gain allies. You'll also make enemies. But you won't be alone anymore." I nodded. "Then let's start." The article went live that evening, not under my name this time, but through a journalist Karina trusted. The headline cut sharp. "Gaslit by Blood, one woman's story of family betrayal." Within hours it spread. News outlets picked it up. Advocacy groups reposted. The audio clip of Ethan questioning my pregnancy went viral. His voice calm, almost smug, dissected by strangers on the internet. Messages flooded my inbox, some from women I'd never met, others from neighbors who said they had always suspected. Support came in waves, but so did the backlash. By the next morning, Ethan's lawyer called, a sharp-voiced man with a tone dripping in condescension. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, "if you continue publishing defamatory material, we'll be forced to pursue legal action." I almost laughed. "Defamation requires lies. Everything I've shared is documented, recorded, backed up 3 times. The silence on his end was answer enough. Nora, of course, chose a different tactic. She posted a video on her lifestyle channel, her face glowing, her voice syrup-sweet. "My sister is struggling," she said softly. "We love her, but she's confused. We're asking for prayers, not judgment." Comments poured in, some sympathetic, others skeptical. But the cracks were showing. For once, her charm wasn't enough to cover the rot. And then came the mistake. In a rush to defend herself, Nora posted a photo of an old page from my journal, claiming it proved I had always exaggerated. She blurred my name but forgot to crop out the date, dated the very same week she had visited my house uninvited. The internet noticed. Screenshot spread. Wait, didn't she admit to breaking into her sister's home? Isn't this literally evidence of invasion of privacy? She just proved Lorraine's point. For the first time, Nora's own weapon turned against her. Meanwhile, Ethan tried to regain control. He showed up at the house one evening, his car headlights slicing through the driveway. I didn't open the door. He pounded on it, voice low but sharp. "Lorraine, enough. You're humiliating yourself." I stood in the hallway, recorder in hand, letting the red light blink. "You're destroying this family," he hissed. "Do you really want to go that far?" I almost opened the door then, not to let him in, but to say the words that had been sitting on my tongue for weeks. Instead, I whispered them into the recorder. "You destroyed it first." His footsteps retreated. Tires screeched. The night swallowed him whole. Days turned into weeks. The story grew bigger. Advocacy groups reached out. A podcast interviewed me anonymously, my voice disguised but my words clear. Each time I spoke, I felt lighter. Each time I shared, the weight shifted from my chest to the world outside. Still, the threats came. Anonymous emails, strange cars idling near the driveway, whispers from old family friends telling me to drop it for my own good. But fear had already taken the worst from me. It couldn't take more. One afternoon, Karina called. Her voice carried both urgency and triumph. "The prosecutor is reviewing your case," she said, "with the footage, the receipts, the audio, and now Nora's own admission online. Lorraine, this could go to court." Court. The word alone made my stomach twist, not because I feared it, but because I knew what it meant. The lies would no longer live in whispers. They would be dragged into the light, under oath. I walked outside, the spring air cool against my skin, the maple trees rustling gently. For the first time in years, the sound didn't make me anxious. It felt like an answer. That evening, I sat on the porch with a notebook in my lap, not a journal of grief this time, a ledger of truth. I wrote down every step I had taken, not just for myself, but for anyone who might walk this path after me. Women who would wonder if they were crazy, if their pain was real, if silence was the only option. And when the last line was written, I closed the notebook and looked at the horizon. Ethan and Nora had tried to erase me, to laugh at my pain, to call me fragile, dramatic, unstable. But here I was, not erased, not silenced, still standing. And now, the world was watching. The courthouse in Burlington was an old stone building, its marble steps worn smooth by decades of footsteps. On the morning of the trial, I climbed those steps alone. No Ethan holding my elbow, no Nora whispering barbs under her breath. Just me, steady and upright. The air was cool, the sky slate gray, but inside I felt lighter than I had in years. The courtroom was small, almost intimate. Wooden benches, high ceilings, the faint smell of polished oak. Karina sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, her presence steady as a lighthouse. Across from us, Ethan sat in a dark suit, jaw tight, eyes flicking between his lawyer and the floor. Nora perched behind him, pearls at her neck, lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize them. They looked smaller than they had in my memory, less certain, less powerful. The judge entered, robes swaying, and the room rose. My hands tightened on the folder in front of me. Inside was everything, my proof, my voice, my survival. The prosecutor began with the audio. Ethan's voice filled the room, calm, deliberate, questioning the doctor about verifying pregnancies. The jurors shifted in their seats. Some frowned, others scribbled notes. Then came the receipts, the fake ultrasound kit, the evidence of staged doubt. Finally, the video. A grainy clip from the dinner, my voice breaking as I accused them, their silence answering louder than denial. Each piece of evidence built on the last, stacking higher until it was impossible to ignore. Ethan's lawyer tried, of course. He painted me as unstable, grieving, misinterpreting. He spoke with authority, but the words felt hollow. When it was my turn, I stood. My legs trembled at first, but my voice did not. "I'm not here for sympathy," I said, looking directly at the jury. "I am here for truth. For years, I was told I was dramatic, fragile, that my pain wasn't real, but what you've heard today, what you've seen, is not drama. It is evidence." I let the silence settle before I continued. They laughed while I fell. They mocked what they stole from me, and they thought no one would believe me. But I believe me. And now, you can too. My throat burned, but I didn't cry. The defense called Nora to the stand. She walked with her usual confidence, chin high, dress pristine, but under cross-examination, her facade cracked. "Did you publish a blog post mocking your sister's grief?" the prosecutor asked. Nora's smile faltered. It was just commentary, creative writing. "Did you enter her home without permission and take pages from her private journal?" Her silence was answer enough. The jury saw it. And when asked if she laughed the night of the fall, her composure slipped completely. "I didn't," she started, then stopped, her voice trembling. For the first time, Nora looked like the child she had once been, afraid of being caught. Ethan never took the stand. His lawyer advised against it. but his silence screamed louder than words. After closing arguments, the jury retired. The wait stretched long, each tick of the clock echoing in my chest. Finally, they returned. The four-person stood, paper in hand. On the counts of emotional abuse and coercive control, guilty. On the count of reckless endangerment, guilty. On the count of defamation and invasion of privacy, guilty. The words blurred through my tears, but the meaning rang clear. Ethan's jaw clenched, but his eyes remained fixed on the floor. Nora buried her face in her hands, pearls shaking against her wrist. Karina placed a hand on mine. "It's over," she whispered. But I knew it wasn't just over, it was beginning. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled of rain. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward, questions flying. "Lorraine, how do you feel?" "What would you say to other women in your position?" I paused, the cameras flashing. Then I spoke, my voice steady. "Believe yourself, even when no one else does, especially when no one else does." And then I walked away. Weeks passed. Ethan and Nora faded from headlines, their names now linked to words they could never outrun. Guilty, abusive, cruel. The Cedar House no longer felt like a prison. I repainted the nursery yellow again, not because I expected to fill it, but because I wanted it to hold light. I planted lavender by the front steps. The scent greeted me each morning, soft and healing. In the evenings, I sat on the porch with tea in hand, notebook in lap, not to record grief this time, but to write stories of survival. Mine, others. Stories that deserve to be told. One afternoon, I drove to the lake near town. The water shimmered under the summer sun, gentle waves lapping at the shore. Children laughed in the distance, their voices carried by the wind. I stood at the edge, the same notebook pressed to my chest. Then I tore out the first page, the one where I had written Lorraine's war. I folded it once, twice, and let it drift into the water. The paper floated, then sank, carried away by the current. I whispered softly, "It's not war anymore." And for the first time, I believed it. Life didn't return to what it was. It became something new, quieter, stronger. Ethan and Nora no longer haunted my nights. Their laughter no longer echoed in my ears. What remained was mine alone, my truth, my voice, my peace. And that finally was enough. Lorraine's story reminds us that silence can be heavy, but truth is always stronger. She was mocked, doubted, betrayed by the people closest to her. Yet she chose courage over fear. She gathered her voice, her proof, and she stood tall until justice answered. If you've ever felt unheard, know this: your story matters. Your pain is real, and healing is possible. Let Lorraine's journey be a light. Not every ending is easy, but every step toward truth is freedom. Thank you for watching. If this story spoke to your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. And always remember, you matter, and your love leaves a mark.